Are you going to crush poker tournaments coming up in 2025? Have you not noticed that these games are getting really freaking hard? In fact, here in 2025, they're harder than ever. There's so much information available. There's so many people that have the capability of being able to study spots and learn how to play with these game dynamics that are putting you into a lot of really tough positions. But how would you like to flip the table and you be the shark as opposed to the fish at the table? I've got 7 strategies that you're going to implement over the next 12 months in order to make sure you are the shark and not the fish at the table. Let's jump in. Covering the 7 tips real quick. They are check raising, pot control, game selection will be king. The all-in or fold method is dead. Exploitative 3-betting, delayed C-betting, and exploitative folding. This is something I don't hear anybody talking about, but I will say right now, this is going to print you money in 2025. Make sure you stay around all the way to the end because exploitative folding is going to be way worth the whole benefit of this entire strategy video. Before we jump into these, it would go real far if you would like and subscribe down below, and make sure you click that little bell notification. That way you get these as soon as they come out. I'm Zach TheTiburon Marcy. I am a 20 plus year no limit hold'em specialist for online poker tournaments, and I both coach and stream. But the most important thing is you're going to get tips and tricks on how to get profitable and stay profitable moving forward. We do all the heavy lifting for you. We do all the study for you so you don't have to. Like, subscribe down below, share this out to your friends. Let's jump into these tips. So tip number 1, check raising. So check raising has become something that you see with increased frequency, but it also has sophistication. Players are employing them not just as value, but also as bluffs on dynamic boards. The trend kind of forces your opponents into uncomfortable spots, especially when facing aggressive continuation bettors. And this one goes hand in hand with delayed C betting, which I'll cover a little bit later. But it's really important about knowing when to check raise with draws versus made hands. And that skill has become really important in modern stakes, modern low to mid stakes poker. Actually, you're seeing a lot in high rollers as well. Players who master the check raise are going to drastically increase their chip accumulation in multi-table tournaments. Tip number 2, pot control is king. The small ball strategy is more prevalent than it ever has been. With GTO basically showing we have the capability of being able to bet pretty much all of our range, nut, and even hand advantage, but it's leading to a little bit smaller raises, a little bit smaller betting, but more frequent. And players are opting for those smaller pre-flop raises and post-flop bets in order to keep variance in check. It does allow for like a lot more post-flop maneuverability, but skilled players, which you guys here at BeTheShark are, you guys are going to wind up leveraging a lot of these smaller pots to steadily build your stack over time. You know, gone are going to be the days of just way over bloating pots, especially with top pair early in your stages of your tournaments. 2025, you're going to see, and you're going to have to be one of the best players that are controlling pot sizes to maintain an edge over less experienced opponents and opponents that are making a lot of blunders post-flop. Tip number 3, game selection is going to be king. So you could almost call this game specialization. And you know, in a later video, I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you guys how I picked apart what I was really good at, what I was really bad at, and I literally just got rid of everything that I was bad at. In fact, as I go over where I was profitable last year, you're going to see I wound up cutting out sit and goes altogether. I had a lot of variance in them. I was up, I was down, and then when I cut them out, my graph went completely up. And what I actually wound up cutting out was pot limit Omaha, was heads up sit and goes all together and sit and goes all together. And I started specializing in three formats of multi-table tournaments, which were deep stack tournaments, PKOs, and rebuys. Those three things, where I was focusing on them, my line and my profitability literally skyrocketed up. In fact, you know what? Here, take a look at this. This right here is where I was messing around with sit and goes, and this right here, that line that you see going straight up, that is where I actually wound up just focusing on multi-table tournaments, and that's it. Game selection is it's not something that's any longer just nice to have. It's a must. More players are adopting a modern strategy, so knowing where you have your edges, it's absolutely crucial in order to maximize your profitability. There are a lot of sites that are offering softer fields, and you're going to have to identify some of those multi-table tournaments where you have the edge and become the shark in the sea of fish. There's a lot of players now that are just dedicating themselves to seeking out those tournaments with a lot of recs and avoiding those with heavy pros and heavy reg participation. Smart game selection, it can often make the difference between printing money, as you see, and breaking even, which you see on my tale of two 2024s. So tip number 3, game selection. Number 4, all in or fold is going to be dead. Small ball is going to be king. Now, this does differentiate from the tip that I had went into earlier about pot control. This is more related to seeing people just jamming all in when they start getting super shallow for no reason. It has started a wave of variance. There was a point in time that we were forcing a lot of folds in the early 2000s, early 2000s all the way up to like 2010. Players are now moving more towards that nuanced small ball strategy, as I had told you. But what they're doing is they're also only strategically using the all-in method if they get to a certain spot. And usually it's on the turn or the river where they know their opponent can't call. Now, the pre-flop jamming is going to start going a little bit by the wayside, especially around the money bubbles, and you're going to start seeing a lot more post-flop play and not risking your entire tournament life. Just as a result, what you're going to see is players are going to start to embrace this shift. Their stacks, your stack size, when you embrace this, will start to steadily progress up, and it will give you more strategic flexibility as you start getting to the mid and the late stages of tournaments. You can still put pressure on some of the smaller stacks with a big stack, or you can use a smaller bet when you're a mid stack and try to control those pots where you're not having to play these humongous pots that wind up costing you your tournament life. As a result, you're just going to see fewer pre-flop jams, and the more hands are going to go to the flop where post-flop skill is going to reign supreme. And remember, as we're talking about this, you're going to start seeing a lot of the skill sets in these next ones on post-flop play. And that takes me to tip number 5, or strategy number 5, which is going to be exploitative 3-betting. Players are starting to take more of an exploitative approach with their 3-bets. They're going to be targeting player tendencies rather than even trying to balance their ranges. And this is where we start to deviate from GTO. Sure, GTO likes ace-5 suited and whatever it is, like king six, whatever that favorite hand that GTO is, you're going to start picking up on reads that you get at players, the ones that overfold, the ones that wind up playing super, super tight ranges, and the ones that would never 3-bet themselves. You want to start targeting them for exploitative 3-betting. Even against some of the loose openers, you could start targeting their bottom end of their raise range by doing a smaller exploitative 3-bet with, let's say, all of your suited aces, or some of your hands that have removal that usually don't have a lot of great post flop play, but are strong enough to have removal and potential post flop play if your loose aggressive opponent winds up calling. Think of things like queen jacks or king jack. As I said before, like even pretty much any ace that has actually any ace period, because you're going to wind up removing an ace from hitting on the flop. And if you're 3-betting, you have pretty much carte blanche to do a Seab Bet immediately afterwards. So exploitative 3-betting is going to become a must-have weapon, especially when you're trying to crush low and mid stakes. Strategy number 6, the delayed Seab Bet. Now, this one in particular, you see utilized in heads-up play because people are Seab betting so frequently. What you can do is you can actually start setting up traps with very strong hands with the delayed Seab Bet, and you're going to see it become a lot more popular because you wind up checking back and protecting a lot of your range, and then maximizing on somebody either donk leading or having to play from out of position because you mask the strength of your hand with a delayed Seab Bet. So instead of just going wild 90% of the time on the flop, if you flop 2 pair, you flop a set with a really strong hand and there's no redraws at it, you could potentially start getting a lot more of your opponent's chips, giving them the rope to hang themselves, especially those loose, aggressive players. And you check back with the intent. By checking back the flop, players can wind up betting on the turn and exploiting those opponents who are just going to assume that you're weak. And you really want to do this strategically with a lot of those players are going to wind up bloating the pot for you. This play actually keeps a lot of wide ranges in and allows for the disguised aggression on the later streets. It also maximizes fold equity and value extraction. So last but not least, strategy number 7 is going to be exploitative folding. I don't hear about this a lot. And the concept to me came when I was working with a coach on playing heads up pot limit Omaha. And, in Omaha, there's a lot of times where people wind up being too strict on their pre-flop ranges, and their 3 and 4 bets are very telegraphed. And one of the ways that you can wind up always in a very good spot is by simply just folding when somebody's 4-betting into you, because it's aces or kings or suited aces or suited kings that they have in their hand. Well, you're going to see a lot more of that going on in poker tournaments or no limit hold'em tournaments as well. A lot of players will start to make their intentions known about the strength of their hand, especially when you start getting in the low and mid stakes. So if you notice this tight a player is suddenly being drastically aggressive, it's pretty easy to know, okay, they probably have a super strong hand. I'm just going to fold. I'm not going to take my ace-10 offsuit that I just pre-flop raised into making this big, huge pot. If, let's say that you see somebody, they 3-bet, you wind up calling with a little bit of a speculative hand, and then they donk lead into you for like 1/2 to 3/4 pot on the flop. Just fold. If you don't hit a huge hand, it's easy to fold. And what you wind up doing is you deny equity to people. There's some people that just fight for every single pot, and there's always going to be a space where you can get it in better. And you just see people falling into, especially at the low stakes and mid stakes, this predictable behavior when they have these big, huge hands. They start overbetting. They start dialing up their pre-flop range sizes, aces or jacks through aces. They go 5x. It's pretty simple. Just, okay, cool. Like, I'm not going to defend my big blind to a 5x raise. I will fold my queen 10 offsuit. The ability to let go of marginal holdings in the face of like disproportionate aggression is going to be the hallmark of a shark. You want to learn to be very disciplined and always be tilting your play to be profitable. So it also denies your opponent the ability to capitalize on their value holdings as well. That's it for me, guys. Remember, be the shark, not the fish. Make sure you've liked and subscribed. Share this with other people. It's going to be important to add in all of these strategies into your 2025 gameplay. Let's recap them one more time. It's implementing check ranges, learning to really pot control, making sure that you're game selecting really well and specializing in those games that you are very profitable in, making sure that you're only ever strategically using all in or fold in spots that really make sense, and doing it with less frequency pre-flop, and doing it where you can start strategically putting people into bad positions later on, but playing more small ball. Number 5, exploitative 3-betting. Number 6, implementing delayed Seab Bets. And number 7, which is the most important of them all, is exploitative folding. That's it for me. Sharks, may all of your big hands hold and your bluffs get through. I'll see you guys on the other side.